This was a trip that Frank and I took from Burnstorm Marina to Fort Myers Beach to be sure everything was working okay with the boat, including the new anchor that we set. Just motoring over to Pelican Bay, we noticed steam coming from the starboard engine, so we turned that off. Here we are anchored at Pelican Bay, anchor held fine, and this is the sunset. The Ranger station, however, doesn't appear to be open, so it's been closed ever since Ian, which is quite a long time. The next morning, when we were going to weigh anchor, the bridle got stuck in the opening from the chain, and we had to loosen the clutch on the windlass, and Frank had to use a little persuasion with a mallet or the end of the winch handle to get it free, but we got loose. Otherwise, that would have been a little of a challenge. We then were motoring down the ICW as the wind was in our face, and this was the Lady Chatham out of South Seas, pretty full, and actually we had the most boat traffic we've ever seen for a weekend on the water all the way down to Fort Myers Beach. Further down the ICW, this was a osprey nest with the parents watching over their chicks. We got down to Fort Myers Beach in the early afternoon and had a reservation for the number 17 out there in the channel with Matanzas mooring field. And this is when we took the dinghy to shore, and our dinghy is there by the piling toward the left. The engine did not start easily, but finally did, and that was something that was a problem when we started, because we had to call the mechanic who had worked on it all summer, and it was working fine on his shop, but he had to come, and apparently the float switch was stuck, and after that it seemed to work okay. When you get off the dinghy dock, this is the side of the trailer, which houses apparently the staff for the mooring field, but it's actually handled pretty well, but no one came to visit us that day. We went ashore at Fort Myers Beach, and as is our custom, we stopped at Nervous Nellie's and got a table inside, since it was kind of crowded outside, but certainly warmer inside. Place filled up quite a bit quickly, but we had our fare, and then we looked at some of the artwork that's on the side of the inside the building on the way to the restrooms, with the pelican and the housing that's projected from the wall. Quite interesting and quite good, actually. We then walked around town, and this is, I think it's called Times Square, with the clock. The beach was pretty empty, of course, at that time of the evening, and the pier is being rebuilt, but one wouldn't notice it because nothing apparently has been done. The shops and restaurants, though, were quite full, but when we got back to the boat, it was very pretty with a night view of the pink shell in the distance. The next morning, we motored at least through the Miserable Mile, but this was the north side of Fort Myers Beach, and one of the craft, which probably passed us at about 30 knots the day before, is on its side on the beach. They were working on trying to extricate it, period. Just below St. James City, as we were under sail, a Leopard Catamaran gave me a call on the radio and wanted to know if they could take a picture of us. Of course, they disappeared. Going back up the ICW in Pine Island Sound, this dredging vessel passed us going south, and this was the one that we saw the previous day that was coming out from the Miserable Mile and took up most of the channel. Here's Catrax under sail. We had good wind from the south, but it was sometimes encouraging unintentional jibe, and we did motor occasionally just under the jib if necessary. We then were able to do some fishing, and we caught 2 Spanish mackerel on the way up. Well, one on the way up and another one when we got into Charlotte Harbor coming back to Burnstorm Marina. They were very good, and Frank kindly did the cleaning on the way back, so that is always much appreciated. This was the weather, and as you can see, it was pretty windy. We had 26 knots of wind from the beam coming into, so just under the jib, we got up to 7.3 knots and actually higher than that, so that was fun. Liz met us at the dock and gave us the spring line, and this is the snow on our street in Dayton. This is what we were missing.